On today's show, the San Diego Padres have been, not really spending all that much this offseason, but reportedly are close to a deal with Yuki Matsui, superstar closer out of Japan, breaking down that news as well as some other potential low-end options for the Padres to go and acquire this offseason when it comes to free agents on the pitching side of things. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Wednesday, December 20th. As always, I am your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, that's Javiipeno, or if you don't want my personal account, no problem, you only want Padres stuff, at @LO_Padres on Twitter, and also check out the podcast where you get your pods from, Locked On Padres on YouTube as well. I forgot to put my guy Pac-Man and Tatis on the set. I'm realizing that right now. I don't know if we're keeping Pac-Man because Michael Wacha is no longer a Padre. So leave a comment below if you think he should hang out here anyway. Today's episode, guys, we're going to be breaking down the Yuki Matsui news, reports, rumors, whatever you want to call them, that the Padres have apparently made him an offer, what that means for the team, what we think about him as an international prospect and what he could do here in the majors, as well as the big meat of the show, talking about some of my picks for under-the-radar targets I think that the Padres should look into on the pitching side of things. So a little bit of relievers and a little bit of starting pitchers. So, guys, it's going to be a fun one. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get 150 buckaroos and bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. It's 150 bucks if your team wins, man. It's pretty cool. FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Let's get started with this episode already. I mean, what's taking me so long? Let's get into this, ladies and gentlemen. Reading from MLBTradeRumors.com, the Padres are close to signing a deal with free agent left-hander Yuki Matsui, reports Mark Feinsand of MLB.com. Earlier, John Morosi of MLB.com reported that the Friars had offered Matsui a contract and also relayed a Japanese-language report from Senkai Sports. The Google translation of that report says the Southpaw has already undergone a medical check, though it seems nothing is official quite yet. Morosi relays that it will be a multi-year deal, though the financials are not yet known at this time. Matsui, 28, is a left-handed reliever that has 10 years of experience in Japan's Nippon professional baseball, having debuted back in 2014. ERA of 2.4 in his 501 career games, tossing 659 and 2/3 innings. He has 236 saves in that time, including at least 24 in each of the past 3 campaigns. He's coming off a strong 2023 season as well, with a tiny ERA of 1.57 while recording 39 saves. He struck out 32.4% of batters faced this year while walking just 5.9%. That gives you the surface level stuff on Matsui. Let's keep talking about him for a second, though. Superstar from there. Very, very cool that the Padres are interested in him, especially because I think that this is an area of need for sure. And with him, by the way, let me tell you, I already mentioned that the 2.4 ERA across 10 seasons, basically, that's really impressive. And he's not the type of guy that is a flamethrower, right? His fastball averages 93, but from what I've seen, and again, I try not to get very scouty on this podcast. I don't want it because that's not my expertise really when it comes to measuring what looks good in terms of the way a pitcher looks and how the ball comes out and all that stuff. I'm not the smartest person in the world. That's when I usually bring on other guests. But 93 miles per hour kind of is where his fastball is at, which isn't great, but apparently a really super unique shape and release. I really like his release. And if you go look at videos of him, he's also got a really unusual frame, right? He's not this huge, imposing guy at all, really. He's only 5'8" and 167 pounds. So he's kind of got a little bit of that, Marcus Stroman, but closer energy to him. But I don't think that that's a bad thing. His splitter is really what it seems like, is what goes absolutely sicko mode for him, getting a huge bunch of Ks on that, kind of like his put-away pitch. But again, he's not the overpowering type, more of an I'm going to toy with you. And I know that that's a little bit less exciting to hear about relievers. Let's just be honest that it's not as exciting. And I get it. When you have high velocity, that racks up more strikeouts, and you could have, your next Edwin Diaz, or in our Padres case, the next Josh Hader. But it needs to be reiterated, but he's been effective for so long, 10 seasons in Japan, really killing it with those numbers that I mentioned before. And if you want a little bit of a recent thing, Mark Melancon was really good for the Padres a couple years ago. Now, don't get me wrong, there was some issues that arose in that season, but he was really effective for them, and he was just kind of like I'm going to toy with you and just have really good command. I think overall was one of his strengths, and I think that might be the case with Matsui here, and I really like it. These are the kind of additions I like the Padres to make. Back-end depth to support the rest of their roster, tertiary additions that just clear up the weak spots, right? Not necessarily that we're looking for more A-plus players, but we're just going to make sure that we don't have any D-minuses on the team anymore, right? And I think adding a Matsui, especially since it doesn't sound like this is a guy that could cost all that much. I really don't. I think that we might see a really cool deal kind of ferment itself around Matsui here. So I'm really excited about that. Again, we don't know the full things here, but I just think that these additions would be great. It helps support your young farm system, right? And what I mean by that is you're complementing it, right? You sign a guy like Matsui for not too much, and then you have a really good farm system that either these type of back end signings that I want the Padres to do could either mean that you're giving your younger players more time, or you could always call up those younger players later if something happens. Just having that depth, and maybe even using those farm system pieces as trade depth, right? For potentially the trade deadline if the Padres turn out really good and they're like, you know what, let's do a little bit of a thing this year. We already have our superstars, so let's kind of do that. So I'm all for that. I think the only other question about this, and also I'm putting this out now just in case he does sign. That way this, it's timely and whatnot. So we'll just assume that he might be getting signed according to those reports. I think a lot of people might be wondering, well, Javi, wasn't the bullpen good last year? Not really, man, not really. And I think that considering that they were really bad in the clutch, but also considering that they also just weren't as good, not even in like 1-run games, but they were, a lot of their stats, even when the bullpen hadn't exploded. Let's think back, if Padres fans remember, against the Giants when they blew 2 saves in a row, that had the 2 straight walk-offs. It was before then that they had been lights out, with the exception of Josh Hader and usually Tom Cosgrove, that the bullpen, the differences between when we were down by 4 runs versus when we were up by 5, or I'm sorry, up by 2 or 1 run, were really stark. So I think that's really the thing here, and why I think that the Padres offense, I do think, was fluky last year. I really, really do. I think that it was, to an extent, yes, I can see guys having bad seasons, but for them to be that bad with runners on base, I think you can expect some regression to the mean. So if I had to address something, it'd be on the pitching side and just getting some depth there. I think you could get some decent DH hitters out there. I've already posed the idea of Jesse Winker. I'm kind of not opposed to anyone on that side, but with pitching, I think that's where they need to shore up a little bit, give their farm. You don't have to rush Snelling or anything like that. No rushing a trade for Dylan Cease, just giving yourself a lot of options, a plan C, D, and E, for example, right? So that's what I'd be a fan of, and I think that the bullpen was legitimately bad. And considering that they may be losing Josh Hader, imagine, right? Imagine what the bullpen could look like there. So it needs a little bit of a makeover, and actually trust Preller and company. The only last question is, what could this mean for Robert Suarez? Yes, he's been a superstar closer in Japan. I don't necessarily think that means he will for sure be the closer if this deal ends up going through for the Padres. If it is, that's great. I would actually love Robert Suarez in a setup role. That'd be great. The problem is you could also view this in the negative connotation. The positive connotation is, let's get Suarez back in the setup role where he was dominant and first earned himself that contract in the first place. And the negative connotation to this is, oh my God, the Padres realized we totally whiffed on this Suarez thing, so we need to get ourselves a new closer. You know what I mean? We totally whiffed on this thing. The numbers and lack of strikeouts were really concerning for Robert Suarez last year. And the only reason I'm not fully out on him, which is why I choose the positive perspective that I just mentioned, is because he was coming off an injury, so I need to see a little bit more. Let me see a little bit more before I hit the panic button that they just totally missed on this guy. I know the numbers were bad. This is a 38% strikeout rate to a 17% strikeout rate. I don't know why I use those two numbers. I listened to Fetty Wap the other day. That's probably why. But that's kind of where I am with it. I like the addition. I think that this would be really cool and would finally be the Padres spending some money, and I think it would be smart spending. They do not have to go out and get a superstar. Not right now. Maybe if things get better, let's say the Padres are pretty good, they have one of the better records in the NL, maybe not necessarily as good as the Dodgers or anything like that, then maybe you say, oh, maybe now we go trade for Dylan Cease because we have a little bit more of an idea of what kind of team we have right now, especially under a new manager, especially with a huge trade of a superstar, especially with all sorts of things, right? So I like the addition a lot, guys. I like it a whole lot, assuming it goes through, which with all these rumors sounds like it might. So hopefully it does. But ladies and gentlemen, there's something else that I like and I'm a big fan of, and it always goes through. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it is the good folks over at FanDuel. Let me tell you, they're just great. They've been sponsors of this podcast for a while. We love them, and we are in the thick of NFL betting season. Honestly, kind of in like the second half of the NFL season, more than that. We're like 2/3 of the way through. But don't worry, FanDuel still got their promotions going. You just got to go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. And if you are a new customer, my friend, you get a chance, 150 buckaroos by winning a money line bet for just 5 buckaroos. That is cool. All you have to do is pick a team and hope they win. You get 150 extra bucks. Really cool. Isn't that great? Bonus bets, ladies and gentlemen. Bonus bets indeed. So go check that out, guys. I don't really have any takes just yet for football for this week. I've been actually kind of decent whenever I do this ad read at picking some teams to look at. Yes, I keep track of that every now and then. But hey, we'll have to see how everything goes down for the rest of the season. Saints-Rams is going to be tomorrow's game. That's a stay away from me. I don't know. I just don't trust the Rams, and I certainly don't trust the Saints. But anyway, go check that out, guys. They've also got player props, over-unders, different spreads that you can check out too. They've got you covered when it comes to betting. So again, FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off your NFL season of betting. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, or at L_Padres, because we're going to be celebrating when the Padres make these epic moves that I'm about to detail to you. We already talked about Mr. Yuki Matsui, okay? Let's talk about some other picks, similar to what I did last week for hitters, some other under-the-radar type of additions. So you're not going to be hearing no Blake Snell on here. You're not going to be hearing Jordan Montgomery or players of that nature, right? Like, that's not what we're going to talk. Certainly no Yoshinobu Yamamoto, right? Can't wait till that guy signs, though, for the record. Just please don't be the Dodgers. That'd be great. Or the Giants, frankly. That'd be great. Please, please. Let's talk about some other guys. And since we just talked about relievers, let's quickly go through some of my picks for relievers that I think could make sense for the Padres. And this, by the way, would assume a little bit that Matsui isn't coming to the team. So we're just going to offer some other scenarios, right? First guy I want to talk about is pretty easy, pretty simple. Jordan Hicks. I think that this is a guy that a lot of people are interested in. This is not some sort of hipster sleeper pick. I just got a notification from the Padres saying happy holidays. I got scared. Jordan Hicks, I think a lot of people are interested in him. Rough 2022, but he was fully back this year, and all of the vertical movement on his pitches was back, specifically on his changeup and fastball, and even his slider a little bit. So I think that Jordan Hicks, well, again, like I said, he was rough a little bit in 2022. He came back with a vengeance and was really, really, really strong this year. For I believe it was the Blue Jays. Came back 3.29 ERA, expected ERA of only 3.3, and FIP of just 3.22, and XFIP of 3.36, i.e. this man is back. His strikeout rate was really good as well, 28.4%. The walk rate isn't the best in the world at 11.2%, but even still, I think that he's got a lot of juice here. And most importantly, he's also really young, just 27 years old. This is the type of guy, frankly, that I could see like by season's end, he's just a superstar closer. You know what I mean? Like everyone sees that this is happening. There was actually a stretch between 2019 and 2021 where I'm convinced that the Cardinals were about to recreate that Royals bullpen, the Royals World Series winning bullpen. Remember I'm blanking on the names, but Herrera and I'm blanking on all those names. Greg Holland was another one. Like those type of guys. They had Jordan Hicks. They had Alex Reyes. Of course, I got to pump up my boy. Giovanni Gallegos and Ryan Helsley are still on the team too. But I was just convinced that they had the Royals bullpen, or at least were as close to having that wipe out, like, oh my God, we have like 5 guys that nobody can hit, so our starting pitching doesn't matter. Might even explain why the Cardinals didn't go after starting pitching until just recently. So I would love him, but I think a lot of teams love him. And I think that this is a high profile guy, frankly, when it comes to relievers. So again, he would be the dream, but I don't know if the Padres are going to be doing it, especially if this Matsui thing is true. Although that being said, I think he's fully back and I think he'd be dominant. I think this guy's going to cost a lot more years from now. Or how do I put this? If he was a free agent after this next coming year, I think he'd be costing a lot more because I think he's going to be awesome next year. But in terms of one that I think that not a lot of people are talking about, Keynan Middleton, formerly of the New York Yankees. He's a free agent, obviously. And I kind of like him. Keynan Middleton, 30 years old. Last year, not the most impressive numbers necessarily for his career. Let me be clear. But this past year, 3.38 ERA, 3.71 expected ERA, 4.2 FIP, and his xFIP of 3.26, which is pretty good. I like him. And he's had a surge, and I mean a surge in strikeout rate for a few seasons now. In 2021, he had a 17.1% strikeout rate. Then in 2022, 21.7%. And then this past year with 2 teams, 30.2% strikeout rate. So he's really getting up there. And I think that if there's one thing we can say about the Yankees is they usually target pitchers pretty good. They're usually pretty good at getting a bullpen together. You know what I mean? So I think that means a lot that they traded for him. Don't get me wrong. The Yankees were mostly roasted for the trade, considering that they were having like their worst franchise season in a long time. And then they were just like, we'll get a reliever. And the fans lost their mind. But I do think he could be pretty good. He started using his changeup more and it became his put away pitch. And then less usage of his fastball, which opponents hit 122 against, as opposed to 294 in previous years. So he'd been, less usage of that pitch, and also opponents didn't hit as well against it. So he's been using his changeup more, which I like. I like seeing that a guy this into his career, that the numbers are being supported. The performance, like the exterior numbers, are being supported by some inner stuff. +1 vertical movement versus the average of MLB relievers on his fastball, which is good. And like I said, the Yankees have been pretty good at identifying relievers, so I kind of like that. So Keynan Middleton, a guy that, hey, the Padres got to rework this bullpen. Garcia, Tim Hill, all those sorts of guys. Nick Martinez ain't going to be anymore. I think you get this Keynan guy for barely anything, and I like his numbers. I really do. So that's one for you. And then the last one, a little bit of an obvious name, but he's been good for a while. Potentially, maybe because he's been on a weird team. I could see it. And maybe people just aren't paying attention to him. That's Dylan Floro, who's pitched for the Marlins for multiple years. And then was a little bit rough this past year with the Nationals, 4.76 ERA in 2023. But before that, 302, 2.81, 2.59. The last 3 years, he's been very, very effective. And if you look at his numbers this year, aren't supported. The ERA does not support. The interior numbers do not support his ERA. Serviceable, like I said, last few years, 4.76 ERA this year versus just a 3.38 expected ERA and a 2.96 FIP. Take that into account with the previous years of excellence, and then also throwing in the fact that, hey, I think it's hard to pitch for the Marlins when you're a reliever because most of your games are going to be like 1-run games. You know what I mean? So he's actually been a little bit more clutch, I think, in a lot of ways than you might expect. So I'm interested in Dylan Floro, Keynan Middleton, and Jordan Hicks as some sort of relievers. I think Hicks is a little bit too obvious. That's why I included the others. I think that someone's going to get. I think Jordan Hicks is going to be incredible. I do. Couple that with the age, I don't see it. But Dylan Floro at age 32 and Keynan Middleton, I don't think that's going to cost that much. And to help retool your bullpen, I would love let's add Matsui, let's add Keynan Middleton, and then maybe we work on transforming one of our many other pitchers with the depth, whether it be Johnny Brito, Randy Vasquez, those type of guys, or anyone in the farm or any kind of lower tier guys. Maybe Pedro Avila could be a decent reliever, whatever. I just like that it gives you options. So that would be kind of my dream output for the Padres bullpen. And one last thing I want to talk about before we head to break, ladies and gentlemen, is this. Another little report is that the Padres are interested in Domingo German. This was actually kind of came out like basically before I started recording this podcast. They had met with him as well as the Orioles and Red Sox. I'm not really interested in this guy for a bunch of reasons. I am wishing him the best in terms of hopefully getting his personal life figured out, but he's got a bad personal life. I don't think that a lot of people are shocked by this. He'd be a reclamation project for the Padres for sure, but I just don't think that this team needs a volatile presence like him. This is a guy who was suspended 81 games for violating the League and Players Association's joint domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse policy, the result of an incident with his girlfriend following a 2019 gala hosted by then Yankees teammate CeCe Sabathia. According to The Athletic, German slapped his girlfriend at the event and then, while drunk, became violent after it. My apologies, I forgot to mention any this might be triggering for any listeners, by the way. The woman eventually hid in a locked room, and a Yankees teammate and wife came to basically help out with that whole situation. That was bad. Not to mention, he also had some clubhouse stuff where he was just throwing stuff around, flipping over a couch. This was past year, appeared to be intoxicated, and was checked into rehab. So don't get me wrong, like, I'm hoping the guy's okay. I'm not wishing awful on him, but he's had a very problematic behavioral pattern for a while now, and I do not think that that's what this team needs. Instead, I think that they should be looking in a much different direction, because on top of the fact that I know he threw the perfect game, which I don't care if it was the A's, it's still impressive. I don't care. There's only been like 20 of them. Like, that's still unbelievable, so good for him. I remember waking up, it was like 12 at night or whatever, it was like midnight, and I was like, I guess I gotta watch this, right? And it was really weird just seeing a guy with his past throw a perfect game like that. Obviously from a baseball perspective, an incredible accomplishment, but it was so jarring and being like, I don't know how to feel about this. This is weird. But I don't like this guy as an option for the Padres. In a baseball sense, sure, I think he could be a solid back-end contributor, but I think that there are plenty of other guys that can fill that role without the baggage, certainly, and I would just prefer not to be dealing with that if I'm the Padres, or heck, if I'm a Padres fan or follower, whatever it is. But there are options, ladies and gentlemen, that can fill that role. Obviously, this is a segue. That's what we do in the business, and I've got plenty of interesting kind of under-the-radar starting pitchers I think that potentially the Padres should look into. They're just my picks, just some ideas, and we're going to get to them in just a second. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. And just like that, we are back, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Locked On Padres podcast. We're killing it, man. We're killing it. I'm proud of today's episode. I feel great. And I feel so great that I'm going to give you guys some under-the-radar potential guys just as a treat here as we approach the holiday season and whatnot. Let's talk about starting pitchers. I already mentioned German. Again, apologies again if I forgot to preface the German stuff without giving a little bit of a warning. So apologies to listeners with that. But let's talk about other guys, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, one of the pitchers that I was really interested in was Tyler Mahle. For the formerly of the Cincinnati Reds. I just want to throw it out there. I was interested in him, but unfortunately he signed with someone else. So that's not, that's sad. That made me sad. I was like, I felt really good about this guy. And he already got taken. 2-year deal with the Texas Rangers, as I talked with Bryce last week. You could go check out that episode. Only 29 somehow. It feels like he's been in the league forever. Pitched for a really tough Reds ballpark. Goes to Minnesota. 3.136 ERA, 3.14 expected ERA. His FIP wasn't great, but you'd be buying high and all that stuff. So I think he would have been a nice addition for the Padres, especially in a pitcher's ballpark. So I'm upset about that. But nonetheless, good for the Rangers. Another one that is a no. I just want to throw him out there only because I think that this would be a classic chasing the carrot type of scenario and name value, and that's Lucas Giolito. I know there might be some people interested in him, but this guy has shown nothing but bad. Forget the numbers for a second. He was traded to the Angels last year, a team that desperately needed production. They gave up a decent prospect fall for him, and he was rough. 4.88 ERA last season. I know he was a name once upon a time. If you look at 2019 through 2021, he was almost a Cy Young guy. 5.2 F4 actually in 2019, 2 F4 in just 60 games in 2020 and 2021, 4.1. But he's just been showing really troubling signs lately. I think he's more name value than actual value. The only thing going his way, he is still young at 28. So I wouldn't be like livid if the Padres said, you know what, let's take a chance on this guy. Because, hey, we have Ruben Niebla. Maybe he can figure something out, right? I totally get that. So I wouldn't be livid, especially if it doesn't cost much. But I think it will. That's my thing, is I think he's going to get overpaid because of the previous years of success and because of the name value, frankly. I think that that's what might happen here, and they'll chalk up the last bunch of seasons to just being off. But, again, Niebla, I'd love to see what he could do with him. This is a guy that has tinkered with his rotation before, very smart guy. I like him, but I just think he's going to cost a little bit too much. And I think that there are other players I'd be more interested in. So a no on Lucas Giolito, but I could see it. I'm just saying. I'm talking about it. Frankie Montas is another obvious one. According to Scott Boras, for whatever that's worth, he's fully healthy. And for me, that's a big deal. Obviously, now, however, he is the agent, so of course he's going to say stuff like that. But look, it wouldn't be the first time a deadline pitcher acquisition by the Yankees struggled. You know what I mean? 6.35 ERA when he came to the Yankees during that stretch of the deadline. And then he was basically hurt, boom, boom, pow, dead. Like, that was it. Wasn't there. But this is a guy who's been, similar to the guy who we just mentioned in Lucas Giolito, a Cy Young potential, like a dark horse Cy Young guy, if that makes sense. And if you just look at his numbers again, before that stint with the Yankees, 2.0 F4 in 2022. Again, only because he was just so bad when he got to the Yankees. Remember Sonny Gray? He was bad there too. But a 4.0 F4 season with the A's. Decent strikeout rate, pretty low ERA. FIP was good at 3.37. This guy has the stuff. He absolutely does. And he's the type of guy that could rack up 200 Ks. He's the type of guy that if all things went well, you could get him as a reclamation project sort of guy, and he could put up similar numbers to a Blake Snell, in my opinion, but without the egregious sense of walks, in my opinion. Not the same ceiling. I think we saw the ceiling for Blake Snell already. Like, he's a two-time Cy Young winner, you know what I'm saying? But, I think that you could get this guy in a small deal. However, I think a lot of teams will be looking at the fact and taking advantage of the fact that he's coming off of an injury. He's not super young. Right? He's not super young. It feels like he's young, but 30 years old, right? I think a lot of teams are going to be interested in him, and I think a lot of teams might want to give him more than what the Padres are willing to shell out. But I'd still be interested in Luis Severino just got a 1-year, $13 million deal with the Mets. So if he's getting that, I could see a world in which Montas gets something similar to that, if not for 2 years. So I think it depends. Boras is definitely going to be a tough client to negotiate with, as he should. This is his job. He should absolutely get his players paid. But because of that, I know that it's tempting, but I don't know for sure if we're going to be able to get him on a small price point. If you can, or at least in a deal that's not going to hurt the team for too long, which I don't think it will. I don't think Montas is going to get himself a Robbie Ray contract just because he was good a couple years ago, right? If he is healthy, though, and if you could get him like on 2 years, 30, if you could get him to like similar with what they did with Michael Wacha, I would kind of like that. I would. I think that's a type of pitcher that the Padres can afford to take a chance on because of how good of a, at least in my opinion, in context of a return they got from Juan Soto, and because I don't think that they're dying for starting pitching as much as other people. I'll take that take with me to the grave. They need starting pitching, but I don't think they're on DEFCON 1 or 4, whichever is the bigger one, whichever is the more extreme one. I don't think they're there yet. So Montas would be fun. We'll just have to see, though. I think there's going to be a lot of bidders there. And again, I'm not saying this guy is going to be a Randy Johnson type of turnaround in the stage of his career where he's just going to go to a new team and go supernova and get like 3 Cy Youngs, but it'd be interesting. Another little player I'm interested in, and I've been obsessed with him for a while. Longtime players or listeners of the podcast will know this, so this is a little bit of an Easter egg. Alex Wood. I've been obsessed with this guy for a while. He doesn't have incredible numbers. He's not a super strikeout guy, but he's the type of dude that could put together your Zach Davies, your frankly, your Seth Lugo type of season. His strikeout rate hasn't been awful before. He's coming off some injuries, so that's why 2023 was rough, but he was so rough in 2023 that I think a regression to the mean is expected. He's had a 26% strikeout rate before. He's been in the league for a while. Probably not going to cost anything. He's 32 years old despite being in the league for a while. I know that there is a good season lurking inside this guy. I know it deep in, like, he's going to have a year where he's pretty dang good. He's going to have his Michael Wacha, Seth Lugo type of year, if not more than that. I just know it, man. I know it. Not to mention the Giants have been pretty shaky with their defense past couple seasons, so maybe that influenced it. I'd like Alex Wood as a back-end type of guy, especially if the Padres, if we're talking bargain bin hunting, I would like him. Eric Lauer is another name I want to quickly talk about. He's had brief stretches where he's racked up the strikeouts. Brief stretches. This would be a peak just trying to get a lot out of nothing. You know what I mean? He was not very good this past season, but he was hurt. So his velocity did go down. I understand that. But usually it's around 93. You know what I mean? 93.3 miles per hour on his fastball. He's had that for the past few seasons, particularly when he was good. His velocity took up a big jump from 2021 to 2022. So he's had decent numbers, and he's not too old. Just 29 years old, or 28, I'm sorry, years old. You want to try and get someone for nothing? I'm just saying, worse ideas, worse pitchers out there than Eric Lauer. I know that would be weird for Padres fans to be like, this never happens. Like, we traded him. Like, we don't want him. You know what I'm saying? But who knows? I think it'd be really funny if he came back and Diablo cooked and got him to maintain those stretches where he's had a really good strikeout rate. His called strikes plus whiffs were really good. Just inconsistent. And again, was hurt last year. So I don't know exactly what value would be. But again, we're talking real bargain bin hunting if this potentially were to happen. Not my top choice, though. Two other guys I want to talk about. Brandon Woodruff is one of them. This would basically be a sign that the Padres are ready to go all in again. It would be fun. This guy is an ace quality player, but it's just such a hard one to navigate because you would be getting him now at a discount because he won't be pitching next year. And I don't know what it would look like, but if you're the Padres and you say, you know, we have Snell and we have, I'm sorry, not Snell. We have Musgrove and we have Darvish on the books. Getting a Brandon Woodruff on like a 2-year deal where you're paying him this year not to pitch, but then get him next year would be interesting. It would be interesting because then it would be like, okay, if it's true that the Padres are not spending now, like at all, like maybe not even on the guys I mentioned, like Montas and Hicks and people like that, it would be a sign that they're like, we really are going for it next year. Like not going for it as if we're not going to try this year, but it'd be a sign that those reports that we talked about previously about the Padres not spending, which we talked about on Monday, that the reports that they are ready to cast their net in next year's free agent market, that would support it, in my opinion, a little bit. It would be them saying, you know what, we're going to pay this guy, but then we're going to have Woodruff, Darvish, Musgrove, maybe Snelling, something like that, and then we could pick from the crop. I don't know. It would be interesting. I still think overall it's a no because of the injury. I don't think that this is a team that is building for a year after. I actually think that this would be a great move for a team like the Orioles, right? The team like the Orioles where they're built to win now and then they can get even better the year after. Like they're definitely built to win now. And it wouldn't cost nearly as much for the penny pitching Orioles. So I think that's a team that makes more sense, but it's still worth talking about Woodruff. The last guy I would argue is the number one overall low-end target for the Padres. That's right. Out of all the starting pitchers I've mentioned, and I've mentioned a lot, I think personally that this last guy would be the most intriguing name that they could bring in, and that is James Paxton. Okay, so Paxton gets a lot of people nervous. I understand that. James Paxton has been just a injury bug walking constantly. But this dude, when he's healthy, is one of the best strikeout guys in Major League Baseball. Let's throw it together. And granted, this is the problem, is that he's just not healthy. He's always a health problem. If you look at the past few seasons, 96 innings for Boston in 2023 and was also really rough. But still, at least he got 96 innings. If he gets healthier, that's good. 4.5 ERA, expected ERA of 3.82, which is pretty good. xFIP of 3.98, that's pretty solid. Strikeout rate did go down, probably because of all the injuries and whatnot. Again, it's not going to cost nearly as much to get this guy, and it's all health related. But before then, guys, this is a dude who's racked up a 40% strikeout rate before. 28, 29, 32. This is an elite strikeout pitcher. And that would make me very interested in him. From 2017 to 2019, in fact, he went 38 and 17. I don't know why I'm bringing up the win-loss rate, but 3.54 ERA, 3.26 FIP, and a 30% strikeout rate in totality between those seasons. I know that was a long time ago, but if you're just willing to say he's 34, he's not super duper old. He is old, but if you're willing to say, all right, what if he comes back though? What if he comes back and is effective and he's the back end guy for the Padres? I think that could make a lot of sense. It reminds me a little bit of like another Garrett Richards type of situation, but with higher upside, where you're getting a guy who also was always injured and had one bad year, but you kind of will be able to get him for nothing. And here's the thing. it wouldn't be quite as awful if he was injured again because of all the Padres pitching depth. You wouldn't be asking the same way you were asking Lugo and Waka last year, and it worked for them, don't get me wrong. But you wouldn't be asking like, oh man, if this guy gets hurt, we don't really have anyone else to call up, you know? If you did that, it's like, okay, maybe by the time he gets hurt, maybe you have a Snelling ready. Maybe you can go and get some Rainy Vasquez innings in there, Johnny Brito, you have Michael King. Depending on how Dylan Lesko and Robbie Snelling develop, I think you could potentially fill in that spot if he were to get injured. And based on his track record, that is pretty likely. But that strikeout rate, you get him on a 1 year or so deal, I think that would be a perfect back-end position piece for this Padres team. I know it's not like exciting to talk about these type of players when you just had so much good pitching last year and you had Blake Snell. I get it. But in my opinion, and supported by those reports that are saying that they're more interested in looking into the offseason next year, getting a Paxton type, and then maybe spending big next year on starting pitching when you'll also have guys like Robbie Snelling and Dylan Lesko more experience, and not to mention Drew Thorpe, who we just acquired from the Yankees, their top pitching prospect. It gives you more options. So in my opinion, a Paxton route would be great. I think he's the ideal candidate that fits this back end sort of vibe I'm talking about. And I don't think he's going to cost much at all. I really don't. I think he's probably going to cost a lot less than someone like Frankie Montas, or someone like any of the other pitchers I mentioned, like Brandon Woodruff. I think will cost less than. I think he'll cost less than Lucas Giolito for sure. So again, that's my vibe on this. Let me repeat one more time before we close things out. Some pitchers that I'm interested in on the reliever side: Jordan Hicks, Keenan Middleton, and Dylan Floro. And on the starting pitching side, I wouldn't hate Lucas Giolito, but I do think that things haven't developed for him that great lately, and I think he's going to get overpaid a little bit. Frankie Montas, Alex Wood, Eric Lauer, Brandon Woodruff, and James Paxton. Domingo German, I am a no on. I would prefer all those other guys much more than him, not just because he's not necessarily the best pitcher in the world, but also because of all the volatility. I just don't think we need that in this Padres locker room that has had plenty of volatility over the past few seasons. You know what I mean? And with a new manager, I just think you'd be pressing, and you can get a Paxton instead, right? If you want to think about it that way, like if something bad were to happen with German and it were to be just not work out, well, I'd prefer taking the chance on James Paxton, who I think has higher upside. And without that, it would just be injury related stuff. Not to mention German can sometimes suffer injuries too. So that's where I'm at, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you think, though. Leave some comments. Tweet at me at Javipeno, Javiipeno, with your thoughts on these kind of targets. And, hey, if that Matsui thing happens, then boom. You maybe heard it here first. Maybe. I don't know, but probably not. Let me know what your thoughts are on my picks, guys. And let me know if there's some other ones that you think that I should have included. It's exciting time, man. It's exciting time. In terms of the last episode for this week, because remember, we are 3 episodes a week. We're in full off-season mode. Going to be talking with Ben Kaspick of Locked On Giants to discuss trading Ha-Sung Kim. It's preposterous, ladies and gentlemen. It's preposterous. But we're going to talk about it anyway. And some of our opinions and takes may surprise you. So look forward to that either tomorrow or Friday. Don't know which day just yet. But until next time, stay safe. And of course, stay faithful. My Fire Faithful homies. Take care.